The neighbor's house was filled with joy and laughter as everyone enjoyed themselves at the party. The sounds of music and conversation filled the space, creating a warm and welcoming atmosphere. John felt his heart was beating faster as he got closer to the front door. He had had a feeling for a while now, but he finally got some solid confirmation from an anonymous message. When he opened the door, the scene he found made his stomach turn. His wife, Emily, was laughing and flirting with the neighbor. Their bodies were so close. Her eyes widened in surprise when she saw him standing there. John didn't. He could have said a word, or just stared at her, and let the weight of betrayal settle on his shoulders. The party continued, but it felt like it was in slow motion for him as he turned and walked away. His mind was racing, and he was overwhelmed by darkness. Thoughts. Revenge began. These thoughts took shape right there on the cold sidewalk of New York, where the brightness of the city lights could no longer erase the darkness he felt inside. What he would do next would change everyone's life forever. John had always been a man of routine. At 38, he had built a solid career as an attorney in New York. Driven by determination and strong ethics, he took pride in being a good husband. He was also a devoted father. His wife, Emily, was a public school art teacher known for her warmth and easy smile. They lived in a cozy apartment on the Upper West Side, a little sanctuary away from the bustle of the city. Their marriage.
This is your story channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please join us to stay updated with more real stories happening around you.
Their marriage, which lasted more than a decade, was always considered an example of a perfect union. They had an 8-year-old son, Lucas, a bright and energetic boy. John and Emily were devoted to their son, Lucas, and participated in all of his school and sports activities. Life seemed to be following an ideal script until small cracks began to appear. John noticed Emily was growing distant. She started showing up late, saying she was busy with school and meetings with her colleagues. At first, he thought she was telling the truth, but he started to feel worried when she was always late and seemed distracted at home. Conversations became less deep, and laughter became less frequent. It was as if a veil of indifference had fallen between them. The neighbor, Mark, was a friendly guy with a big presence. He had moved into the building 2 years earlier and quickly became a part of the building's social circle. He was single, successful, and charming, and he often organized events for the residents, becoming a popular figure. John and Emily, like most, had been to several of these parties, where Mark was always a generous host. This night began like any other. John returned home, exhausted after an endless day at work. The office. Lucas was in the living room watching TV, while Emily was in the kitchen preparing. It was time for dinner. He approached her. He tried to have a friendly chat with her, but she was distracted, smiling a little bit and responding with just a few words. The atmosphere was a bit tense. It was a bit tense, and John decided to let it go, thinking her behavior was probably just her way of dealing with everything. Maybe she was just tired. During dinner, John and Emily shared a moment of connection. Emily brought up the party at Mark's house. "You don't mind if I go, do you?" she asked, her voice warm and hopeful. "I just need to relax a little," he said, trying to sound casual. John gave a nod, understanding. But he felt a little uneasy, as if something wasn't quite right. He felt like something wasn't quite right, but he wasn't sure what. Without proof. After Emily left, John tucked Lucas in and sat down in the living room, trying to focus on a book. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was then. His phone buzzed with an anonymous message. It read, "Your wife is with Mark. Go over there." He felt like he needed to go check it out. For yourself. John felt a rush of concern. He fought the urge. He felt a tug of war between following his curiosity and his fear. His curiosity and fear were stronger. He left His mind was racing as he headed for Mark's apartment. The short walk felt like a long one. When he finally arrived, he looked through the window and saw the party in full swing. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. He took a deep breath, preparing himself for the worst, and entered without being seen. He noticed. The sight of Emily in Mark's arms hit him hard. She didn't notice him at first, but when she did, the panic in her eyes was clear. John didn't make it. It was just one scene. He just turned and walked away, feeling like every step he took him further away from the man he thought he was. The walk back home was tough. Home was a blur of emotions. He felt a mix of anger and pain, and it all felt a bit overwhelming. His mind. When he arrived, he found Lucas sleeping peacefully. Seeing his son made him feel responsible, but he wasn't sure how to handle it. He tried to push it aside, but it wouldn't go away. I had to stay calm for Lucas and find a way to deal with it. The pain of betrayal. For the next few days, I tried to be strong for Lucas. John kept up the act, but deep down he put on a brave face for the sake of normalcy. Emily tried her best to be strong for him. She tried to talk to him several times, but he avoided her, fearing that any confrontation would lead to an emotional breakdown. He was quiet as he laid a plan to expose Emily's betrayal and make her feel the pain. He hired a private investigator to follow Emily and gather evidence of her affair with Mark. He hired a detective to follow Emily and gather evidence of her affair with Mark. The photos and messages he received only confirmed his suspicions and fueled his anger. John knew he needed to be meticulous and thorough. He was determined to be patient. Revenge. I thought, is a dish best served cold? As John worked out his plan, he continued to be the devoted father and capable professional he had always been. Lucas, unaware of the emotional upheaval going on with his parents, was the light of his life. John decided that his revenge would not only punish Emily, but also ensure that Lucas would not suffer the consequences of her betrayal. His first step was to approach Mark in a way that was thoughtful and considerate. One afternoon, he met him in the lobby of the building and proposed a meeting to discuss a community project. Mark, not suspecting a thing, agreed right away. He accepted. John knew it. He knew he needed to gain his neighbor's trust so he could share his ideas with the community. He knew that if he wanted to expose him, he'd need to earn his trust. So John began to outline. His plan was to get even. He was so determined. He was ready to transform pain into strategy and disappointment into action. The game of cat and mouse was about to begin, and John was ready. Every move. The future was uncertain and dark, promising twists and turns that no one could predict. As time slowly ticked by, John found himself in a state of anticipation. As time went on, John started to feel like a different person than the one he used to be. His eyes, once full of life, now reflected the coldness of a meticulous plan. He started studying Mark and Emily's routine, looking for any little flaw he could use to his advantage. Revenge. Become his motivation, the fuel that fueled his daily life. Actions. The meeting with Mark. It happened in a cafe near the building. John arrived. Punctual as always, he found Mark already settled in with a carefree smile. They talked. They chatted about all sorts of things like the community projects they're working on and the friendly vibe in the building. John kept the conversation going. He put on a friendly face, showing interest in what they were talking about. Mark's every word was like a piece of a puzzle, slowly coming together in John's mind. Revenge. John's was the first. The move was simple but effective. He organized a social event in the building with the intention of getting even closer to Mark and Emily. The party was a Saturday night affair, attended by a few close friends. Residents. John watched, his heart filled with joy. He chatted with the guests, but his eyes were also on his wife and the neighbor. He couldn't help but notice the glances they shared, the tension in the air. Every gesture. It was as if they were confirming his suspicions. Felt like a betrayal. During the event, he felt a sense of unease. John introduced Mark to a lawyer friend, suggesting that they could work together on a project. Mark, flattered, accepted without hesitation. John knew. He knew that gaining Mark's trust was critical to the success of his plan. He knew that Mark was the key to making his plan work. He would have to be close enough to expose him at the right time. In the days that followed, John started to gently plant some doubts in Emily's mind. He started making casual comments about fidelity, telling her about acquaintances who had betrayed them, and reflecting on trust in a relationship already full of guilt. Fear. John watched closely. He was delighted to see that his words were having an effect. The private investigator continued to provide evidence, and John meticulously collected each piece of evidence. Care. He collected photos of meetings, messages exchanged, and even recordings of compromising situations. Conversations. He knew that when the time was right, this evidence would be his ultimate weapon. One day, while Emily was at work, John got a call from the detective. "There's something you need to see," the voice on the phone said. They met in a cozy cafe, and the detective handed over a thick stack of papers. Envelope. John opened it, eager to see what was inside. Inside, there was a series of photos of Emily and Mark together in various places. Among the pictures, one caught John's eye. A joyous shot of Lucas smiling and playing with Mark in a park. It was clear from the photo that they looked very much alike. This revelation hit John like a final blow. It was clear that Lucas was Mark's biological son. Mark's son. This discovery shook John to his core, but he decided to use this information to exact some revenge. He had to expose Emily and Mark, but he also had to protect Lucas. It was a difficult time for him. John spent sleepless nights spent planning every detail, every move. He was determined to exact his revenge. He wanted to make sure it was precise and devastating. He started to stir things up, trying to increase the tension between Emily and Mark. He made insinuating comments, abruptly interrupted conversations, and even hinted that he knew. He was trying to stir up trouble between them. Emily began to feel uneasy. She looked a little nervous. Mark, usually so self-assured, couldn't help but feel uneasy. John was the one who organized everything. They decided to have a dinner at home, inviting Mark and some close friends. During the meal, he casually mentioned the importance of loyalty and how heartbreaking betrayal can be for a family. Emily almost. She dropped her glass of wine, and Mark tried to keep his composure. But the tension in the air was palpable. It was almost tangible. John understood. The moment of revelation was approaching, and he had to be ready for it. He was ready. Luckily, the perfect opportunity arose when Mark invited John to a business meeting out of town. They traveled together, and John took the opportunity to strengthen his relationship of trust with his neighbor. During the trip, he asked questions about Mark's personal life, trying to glean information he could use later. Mark felt comfortable enough to open up about his past relationships and future goals, not realizing that every word was a tool in John's hands. Back in New York, John's actions intensified. He subtly left hints for Emily, like phone messages that hinted at his knowledge of something more. Emily, already feeling overwhelmed by her guilt and fear, started to break down. His absences became more frequent, and his excuses more elaborate. She felt so fragile. John felt it was time to finally let her in on his secret. He arranged a meeting with Mark and Emily at the neighbor's house, using the guise of discussing an important project. John arrived. He arrived early, carefully setting up the cameras he had hidden to record everything. When Emily arrived, John noticed her nervousness. Mark, on the other hand, seemed confident, believing he was in control of the situation. During the meeting, John noticed how the air around Emily felt different. John showed them the evidence he had collected, and it was clear he was serious. There were photos, messages, and recordings on the table, and each one made Mark look more and more guilty. The last one was the worst. Emily started crying as Mark tried to explain his actions. John remained. He was calm, watching the unfolding truth before him. But the final blow was the revelation about Lucas. "You think you can destroy my life and get away with it, but you're wrong," John said. His voice was calm and measured. He was in control of his emotions. "Lucas is your son, Mark. And I have the proof. I've got proof. I've got it for everyone." The reaction was overwhelming. It was heartbreaking. Emily was overcome with emotion, and she couldn't hold it together. Mark turned pale and lost his words. He understood the gravity of his actions. John left. He felt strangely satisfied in his neighbor's house. He felt a sense of justice being served, even if it came at the cost of others. He knew he had a lot more to do to make sure justice was served. But in that moment, he tasted the first victory. The room fell silent, broken only by Emily's sobs and the distant hum of New York traffic. John remained. He stood, observing the chaos he had unleashed with a calm, thoughtful gaze. Emily tried to. She tried to compose herself, wiping away her tears as she looked desperately at Mark, searching for some kind of support. Explanation. You knew all along that Emily's voice was trembling, almost a whisper. You knew and you let it happen. Let's keep going. John nodded slowly, his face showing he understood. Yes, I was aware, and I allowed you to dig your own grave. Your own grave. What surprised me was, I was taken aback by the extent of your actions. Betrayal. Mark, still pale, tried to regain some control of the situation. John, we can work this out. Think about Lucas. He doesn't have to. Don't let this drag you into it. John laughed, but it was a bit bitter and empty. Lucas is the only reason I didn't expose this before. But you left. You left, and now I have no choice. You caused a lot of harm. Our family, Mark. You took so much from us, Mark. The tension in the room was almost palpable as John spoke. Emily tried to move closer to him, but John took a step back, his expression hardening. Don't you dare touch me, he growled. You lost, he said. Exactly, Emily whispered, her voice soft. Emily backed away, her eyes welling up with tears. Eyes again. It was me. She looked a bit puzzled. John. It seemed like Mark had played a part in this too. I thought you weren't as invested in our relationship anymore. I thought you didn't love me anymore. I thought you didn't love me anymore. John. I said it over and over, almost like a prayer, and I couldn't help but feel a bit surprised by it. His voice. You thought I didn't. I love you so much and I wanted to be with you, so I chose to be with the neighbor. With the neighbor. But it wasn't. It was just a mistake. You had a son. You told me you had a son with him and I believed you. Mine. Mark tried to calm things down. John, Emily. John's right. It was a terrible mistake. It was a mistake. But we can't let this destroy us. We can find a way to move on. John stared. He looked at Mark with a serious expression. Move on. Do you really think that's the best idea? Do you really think there's anything to go on after this? Do you really think you can destroy my family and get away with it? John's anger. It was clear, but he kept it under control. I promise I won't kill you, Mark. That would be too. It's easy. I want you to feel what I felt. I want you to see your life crumble before you, just like mine. Mark tried to argue, but John cut him off. You'll be leaving this place soon. This city. You'll just fade away. Out of our lives. And if you try anything, the evidence of that betrayal will end up in the right hands. Your reputation, your career, all the things you've built up. It's going to be really hard, but we'll get through it. Emily fell. She was on her knees, begging for forgiveness. John, please don't do this. Think of Lucas. He needs us. John looked at her. She saw the sadness and anger in his eyes. Lucas is the only reason I'm willing to give you a chance. I'm willing to give you a chance. But I will never. I'm ready to trust you again. I'm so sorry about our relationship. I'm sorry, but I just won't be able to trust you again. I'm going to be the same. He turned to Mark. One last time. You have until the end of the week to get out of here. If I see you in New York after that, I'm afraid the consequences will be devastating. Mark nodded, feeling a sense of defeat. He knew John. He wasn't bluffing. I'll do it. Go. Promise. John didn't. Please answer. He took the evidence from the table and left Mark's house, leaving a trail of emotional destruction in his wake. Behind him, the walk home. It was a mix of relief and pain. He had started his journey towards retribution, but he understood that it would be a long road ahead to go. In the coming days, he would continue to work on this journey of healing and justice. John went about his usual routine, but with a newfound determination. He watched closely. Emily was keeping an eye on Mark, making sure they were both doing what they said they'd do. Mark started packing his things, and within a few days, his apartment was empty. John felt. He felt a sense of satisfaction, even as he watched his neighbor leave, knowing that his life had been irrevocably changed. Emily, on the other hand, was in a constant state of fear. She tried to make things right. She did everything she could to show John that she still loved him, and loved him deeply. She felt remorseful. But John, he was a different story. He was distant and cold, not allowing her to get close emotionally. One night, while Lucas was in bed, Emily approached John in the living room. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice breaking. Her voice was cracking. John sighed, but he nodded. "Speak," he said kindly. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice soft. "John, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I understand. I can't take back what I've done, but I'm ready to do whatever it takes to make things right. Our marriage." John looked at her. His eyes showed the pain he felt. He felt it too. "Emily, you have really hurt me. You broke something in me that may never be fixed. I want to believe. We can get through this, but I'm not sure if it's possible." Emily wiped away a tear, trying to find the right words. "The right words. I'll do anything to help. John. Therapy, counseling. Whatever it takes. Just don't leave me. I'm worried about our family falling apart." John was. After a brief moment of quiet reflection, he felt a range of emotions, including anger and sadness. "We'll try," he said, his voice quivering slightly. Finally. But he added, "But know this. It won't be easy, but we'll get through it together. It's going to take some time, and it's going to be a journey. It's going to take some time, and I'm here for you if you need it." Emily nodded her head in agreement. She nodded her head vigorously. "I'm all in, John. Thank you so much for giving me a chance." John didn't answer. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he also knew he had to try for Lucas, if not for anyone else. He felt a deep sense of revenge, but he also knew that he had to balance that with the responsibility of being a good father. As time went on, the tension and silence became a normal part of life. John stayed busy with his work. He devoted every spare moment to Lucas, trying to give his son a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos his life had become. Emily, in turn, dedicated herself to regaining John's trust, attending every therapy session and making a conscious effort to repair the damage that had been done. They started with individual sessions where they could both express their feelings and frustrations without fear of judgment. The therapist, a kind and experienced man, he helped John deal with his anger and resentment, while Emily worked on understanding her own actions and motivations. The sessions were tough, but they were also incredibly meaningful. They required honesty, even when it was painful, and they brought up emotions that they both needed to face. John, though hesitantly, began to notice some positive changes in Emily. She was genuinely sorry and committed to fixing the relationship. But the pain of the betrayal and the discovery about Lucas was still really hard for him to deal with, and it made it tough for him to open up completely. Meanwhile, John kept a close eye on Mark's situation. He discovered this. Mark had moved to a small town far from New York, trying to start his life over. While the physical distance brought some relief, John knew the emotional scars would remain. One in particular. It was a cold winter night, and New York was covered in snow. John was in the middle of his own life trying to move on when he got an unexpected phone call. It was from the private detective. "John, I have something you need to see," he asked. "Can we meet up and take a look?" "Meet?" John nodded, eager to help. "I'm feeling a bit uneasy." He felt a bit apprehensive. They met in a quaint little cafe. As always, the detective handed him an envelope, and John opened it to find new photos and documents. It turned out that Mark had been involved in some shady activities in New City. It looked like it might have something to do with money. It looked like he might be involved in some financial fraud. "Why would someone do that?" "It's something I really care about," John asked. The detective replied, I'm intrigued because it might be a way to make sure he doesn't cause trouble again. If this information gets into the right hands, Mark could be investigated and eventually arrested. John thought for a moment. The idea. Deep down, he felt it might be a good idea. He imagined seeing Mark completely broken down, made to pay for every mistake and every betrayal. But he also knew that right now, he needed to focus on his own life and rebuild what was left of it. His family. He decided to take action. He shared the information with the right authorities and made sure Mark was safe. Mark was investigated. It brought him a quiet sense of justice and peace. He knew he was doing the right thing, not only for himself, but to make sure Mark didn't hurt anyone else. With Mark out of the picture, he could focus on his own well-being. With Mark out of the picture, John turned his full attention to Emily and Lucas. The therapy sessions were beginning to show more significant results. Emily felt more at ease opening up to the process. She opened her heart in a way she never had before, sharing deep fears, insecurities, and regrets. John, in turn, allowed himself to be vulnerable, acknowledging his own pain and frustration. One night, as they sat together in the living room, Emily held John's hand. She said, "I know I did something unforgivable, and I know you may never fully forgive me, but I want you to know that I love you, and I always have, and I will do everything I can to prove it to you every day." John looked at her. He saw the sincerity in her eyes. "I love you, and I love you too, Emily. That's why. That hurt so much. But I'm ready to give us and Lucas a try." Lucas. They embraced. A simple but powerful gesture of love and support. It was a heartwarming moment, full of meaning. It was the beginning of a beautiful journey. It was the start of a long journey toward rebuilding the trust and love that had been torn apart. In the months that followed, John and Emily worked tirelessly on their relationship. They continued to attend therapy sessions and made a daily effort to reconnect. Lucas, unaware of many of the tough details, flourished with his parents' renewed attention and love. John knew the road ahead would be long and full of challenges. While revenge brought a sense of justice, it didn't bring complete peace. He would have to learn to forgive, to let go of anger, and to find a way to love again without reservation. The journey culminated in a quieter understanding that life is complex and nuanced. John and Emily weren't just trying to save a marriage. They were rebuilding their own identities and finding a new way forward. Together, as time went on, they found a new rhythm in their lives. John and Emily, still on the path to healing, began to rebuild what was left of their relationship. Lucas, full of joy and lightness, was a constant reminder that they were working so hard to find their way. It made all the difference. John knew. Trust took time to rebuild, but the little steps forward were truly heartwarming. John dedicated himself wholeheartedly. He put his heart and soul into both his work and family, trying to find the perfect balance between the two important parts of his life. He started looking for new opportunities in his career, finding in his professional progress a way to channel the emotions he was still struggling to control. Meanwhile, Emily was doing her best to keep moving forward with her therapy and to strengthen her bond with John and Lucas. One morning, as John prepared for another day at the office, he received a text message from Mark. Surprised, he cautiously opened it. Text. Mark was desperate, asking to see John one last time. John felt conflicted, but in the end, he decided to meet with Mark. John felt bad for him, and so he decided to meet with Mark. Request. They met in a cute little cafe outside of town, away from familiar eyes. Mark looked tired and sad, with dark circles under his eyes. Despair. "John, I know I can't ask for much, but I really need your help," Mark began, his voice cracking with emotion. John crossed himself. His arms remained still and calm. His expression was one of concern. "Why should I help? You, Mark, after everything. What have you done, my friend?" Mark let out a sigh and ran his hands through his hair. "I've done a lot," he said. "I've made some mistakes, and I'm learning from them. For them. But now, I've been threatened." The people I've dealt with in the past aren't the forgiving type. They're not the forgiving type. John looked. He looked at John, thinking about what he said. And what exactly do you expect? What can I do to help? I really need a lawyer. Someone who can help. I'm in a tough spot here, and I could really use some help to get out of this situation before things get worse. It's getting late. I'm aware of that. I know I might not be the best person to ask, but I'm reaching out as a last resort. John thought long and hard about the situation. The idea. He felt really bad about the idea of helping Mark, but he knew that it could put him and Emily and Lucas in danger. It was a really tough decision. Very well, he finally said. I'll help you, but you should know that this doesn't change anything. Between us, I'm doing this because I care. I'm doing this to protect my family. My family. Mark nodded, understanding. He nodded, grateful for the offer. Thank you so much, John. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm here to make things right. From that meeting on, John became involved in Mark's defense, using his skills to make sure the situation was resolved fairly and quickly. He made sure Emily was in the loop and reassured her that the family's safety was his top priority. At work. As John processed Mark's case, he discovered a new way to deal with his anger and resentment. Helping Mark, despite everything, allowed him to process his own emotions in a healthier way. Emily, seeing John's efforts to resolve the situation, felt closer to him. She knew he was still hurt, but John's willingness to face the problem head-on was a sign that he was trying to move on. She knew he was an important part of her life, and she wanted to be an important part of his life, too. John and Emily began to address the deeper issues in their relationship, exploring the reasons that had led them to this situation and looking for ways to prevent the same mistakes from happening again. John realized that rebuilding his marriage wasn't just about forgiving Emily, but also about forgiving himself for not seeing the signs and not being able to prevent the betrayal. The betrayals. One particularly eye-opening moment came during a therapy session they shared. The therapist asked them both to write letters to each other, expressing their feelings without the interference of immediate dialogue. John paused, but eventually poured his heart out on paper, sharing his frustrations, his aches and pains, and his dreams for the future. Emily did the same. When they read, their letters to each other were filled with tears and heartfelt reconciliation. They realized that despite everything, there was still love and respect between them. Those letters became a symbol of their journey together, a reminder that they were willing to fight for what really mattered. Meanwhile, Mark was able to resolve his legal issues with John's help. He left town. He promised never to interfere in John and Emily's lives again. John felt so relieved when Mark left, knowing that he could finally focus on his family without the weight of the past looming over them. Life began to stabilize. John and Emily started to enjoy the simple pleasures again, like family dinners, walks in the park with Lucas, and conversations at the end of the day. Each moment was a step forward. Each moment was a victory, a step forward. They were taking steps toward healing. John still had a lot of work to do, but he was making progress. He's carrying emotional scars, but he's learning to live with them. He knew that it might never be fully trustworthy again, but he was ready to keep trying, one day at a time. He understood that getting even wasn't going to bring back the past, and that's okay. His pursuit of justice had dimmed, replaced by a deep longing for peace and healing. Life went on, imperfect but full of possibility. John and Emily were ready to face the future, knowing that together they could overcome any obstacle. Winter in New York was gently fading, as if to make room for the promise of renewal and the approaching spring. John, Emily, and Lucas found a new rhythm together. A new normalcy. The emotional. Though there were still scars, they were committed to rebuilding the trust and intimacy that had been damaged. John was in his office when he got a call from his brother David, who lived in Boston. "John, I need to talk with you. It's urgent," David said, his voice expressing concern. His voice was a little tense. "Of course it is. What happened?" John asked, concerned. It's about Mark. He was found. He was found dead in his apartment last night. The police are looking into it, but it seems like it was a suicide. John sat there, thinking about it and feeling all kinds of emotions. Despite everything, John was still processing it all. The resentment she felt towards Mark, his death, brought a whirlwind of emotions. Part of him felt. He felt a sense of relief, as if a heavy weight had been lifted, knowing that a cycle of pain had finally come to an end. But at the same time, he felt a sense of responsibility for the tragic outcome. Result. David continued. I know you had your differences with him, but I thought you should know. If you ever need anything, I'm here for you. I'm here for you. Thank you so much. David. I'll take some time to think about it. This and then we'll talk more, John replied and hung up the phone. John spent some time thinking. The rest of the day, John took some time to think things over. When he returned home, he decided to tell Emily about it. Mark's death. She was shocked. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Her face. John, do you think this was? Do you think it was our fault? I'm not sure. Emily. He was involved. He was involved in so many things. But we can't let this get in the way. We don't want to let it destroy us. We have to be careful not to let it affect us, too. We have to. John said, trying to calm her. Focus on what we have now. As time went on, the news of Mark's passing began to spread. But John and Emily decided to step back and let others support each other. They continued to focus on their family and try to find peace after everything they'd been through, after so much turmoil. But Mark's ghost, it was still there, looming over them, reminding them of the mistakes and betrayals from the past. One night, while Lucas was in bed, John and Emily had a deep talk about the future. The future. They talked about how they wanted to make sure they were doing the right thing. John. For us too. For Lucas, Emily said, holding his hand. I'm right there with you, Emily. We're on the right path, I believe. We're on the right path, I'm sure. Let's keep our eyes on the prize. On building something new. Something worthwhile. John replied, feeling a weight lifted from his shoulders. As time went on, things started to get better for the family. Therapy helped them work through many issues, and John and Emily started to fall in love with each other all over again. In an effort to start over, they decided to move to a new home, away from the painful memories of the past. Lucas was thrilled about the change, eager to explore a new environment. The new home was spacious and bright, a symbol of a new beginning. With a renewed sense of purpose, John and Emily chose to create new memories, focusing on nurturing their relationship and ensuring Lucas felt loved and happy. But as often happens in life, there was another twist in the story. In storage. One morning, while unpacking boxes in the new house, John found an envelope addressed to him with no return address. One address. When he opened it, he was surprised to find a letter. It was a letter from Mark, written before he passed away. John, if you're reading this, it means my life has come to an end. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect forgiveness, but I do want you to know the truth. I was forced. I made some terrible decisions and got involved with some dangerous people. I couldn't take it anymore, and I felt like I was at the end of my rope. I thought that maybe death would be the only way out. Felt like there was no way out. But there's something I need to tell you. You must know. Emily never did. I knew Lucas was my son. It was a choice. It was a choice I made alone because I was afraid of losing everything. She was so innocent in so many ways. The weight of the truth was mine alone. I'm asking you to take care of her and Lucas, and to find a way to move forward free from the shadows of the past. Mark John listened quietly, taking in the words. The revelation. This added a new layer of complexity to the situation. Emily was unaware of this. She was a victim of circumstance in many ways. She was just like him in that way. John felt a range of emotions, from relief to sadness, and a renewed determination to move forward. He shared the letter with Emily. That night, she read it, and tears silently flowed down her cheeks. I didn't know, John. I swear to you, I didn't know. I believe you. You, John said, hugging. You. And this only confirms what we have to do. We have to move forward. We're in this together, and I know we can do it. As time has passed, we've all settled into a new rhythm of life. House. John and Emily and John work together to nurture their relationship, building something stronger. They're becoming more and more true to themselves. Meanwhile, Lucas, who was still a child, grew up happy and healthy, surrounded by the unconditional love and nurturing care of his parents. Meanwhile, John, Emily, and Mark are also navigating their own journey of love and connection. The story was a web of love, betrayal, and redemption. John's journey led him to forgiveness and self-discovery. Mark's death was heartbreaking, but it also led to some really meaningful healing. As the sun shone brightly on a new spring, the family found the peace they had been longing for. They weren't perfect, but they were certain that together, they could overcome any challenge that came their way. Life went on, imperfect but full of new possibilities.